More than half of those suffering with schizophrenia receive zero treatment, but with the right diagnosis, treatment, and long-term support, someone with schizophrenia can lead a very functional life. Education is the first step to creating better outcomes for patients with schizophrenia. And in our first session, leading psychiatrist Dr. Dom provides foundational knowledge on schizophrenia and what life looks like if it goes unaddressed. Welcome back to MedCircle, Dr. Dom. For our viewers who might just be meeting you for the first time, give them a little bit about your background.
Oh, okay. Dr. Domenick Sportelli. I'm a board-certified psychiatrist. I'm double boarded. I did boards in adult psychiatry and child and adolescent psychiatry. And before that, I had another life as a general family doc. So I did initial family medicine and then psychiatry. And now I practice psychiatry, hospital-based mostly, as well as private practice.
Fantastic. Today we're talking about schizophrenia. What is that?
Well, let me just start by saying I'm very glad we're talking about this, because out of all of the psychiatric illnesses that I experience on a daily basis with patients and families in the hospital, I'm going to venture to say that schizophrenia is probably the most feared and the most misunderstood at the same time. But I think that's why it's so feared, right?
Because when you say feared, by the public?
Feared, right. I think I'm going to use a word that I hate, but I'm going to do it on purpose because I want people to know that I hate it. When the lay person or the average person thinks crazy, and that's the word I hate, I think they think schizophrenia, right? It's like that picture in their mind of the person that is talking to themselves, that has internal preoccupation, that is hearing things and seeing things that aren't there. We're going to talk about what schizophrenia is, but I think that's the public perception of that terrible word crazy, which actually means nothing to me, right? And I think that's why people are so afraid of it, because if I have schizophrenia, I'm quote unquote crazy. And I want to clear that up.
Yeah.
I want to clear that up today, and that's why we're here. I want to talk about schizophrenia. I want to explain it to the best of what we know in science and psychology and psychiatry. Now we're going to talk about treatments. This is something, Kyle, that there's a lot of myths about, right? I think people think that it's much more rare than it is. I mean, 1 in 100 isn't that rare.
So 1 in 100 people have schizophrenia?
Wow. 1 in 100. 23 million people worldwide. And the thing about schizophrenia that we're going to talk about is that because it's so mentally debilitating and the way it affects your brain and your thought process, it lends toward a very high likelihood that you're not going to get treatment appropriately, because you're not going to follow up. And you're probably not going to follow up with the medication regimens and things that can help you. So it has a very high non-compliance rate with treatment, which leads to worse outcomes, right? So it's a really, really challenging illness, obviously for the people that are experiencing it, but even as providers, it's something really hard to get under control. But let's go back. I mean, your question was, what is schizophrenia, right? So schizophrenia is a brain illness. I want people to think about this as a biological illness. It is an illness that we know changes the way that we perceive the world. Meaning, it creates things in our minds like hallucinations, which is seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting things that aren't there. And we'll talk about the definition of hallucinations so our viewers understand what that even means.
Right.
It's delusions, which are false beliefs, but fixed false beliefs. Delusional is the CIA has planted a chip in my brain and you're controlling my thoughts. And there's nothing you could tell me to get me to change my mind. That's a delusion. So people with schizophrenia experience hallucinations, delusions, disorganized thinking. So their thinking pattern is disrupted. So when you speak to them, they present very disorganized. Their speech can be very disorganized. And we'll talk about the nuances of this. And there's also a component of schizophrenia called the negative aspects of schizophrenia, which is the presentation. You sort of withdraw, you become isolative, you become very flat, you almost become removed from your external environment. So from an outsider's objective perspective, sometimes people with schizophrenia don't make eye contact, they're very, very flat and blunted, almost mask-like. Right? And that's what we call the negative aspects of schizophrenia, right? Very blunted. So in short, it's a brain disorder that leads to all of these presentations that are incredibly debilitating.
What does life look like for somebody with untreated schizophrenia?
Untreated schizophrenia, honestly, is almost, and of course, there's a spectrum. Just like any mental illness, there are very high functioning schizophrenics, and there are some people that just have it very severely. What life looks like for someone with schizophrenia untreated, in most cases, I'm going to venture to say 9 times out of 10, it's impossible to live a normal life. Because there are so many disruptions, right? Now, I mean, how could you get up and go to work if you have voices in your head constantly talking to you? If you have a verbal commentary in your brain of everything that you're doing that could sometimes be derogatory, that can be persecutory, right? Telling you what a horrible person you are. Sometimes you're hearing conversations in your head that you're not even a part of. So imagine trying to go to work and raise a family while you're dealing with that. Imagine trying to go to work and raise a family and go to school when you sincerely believe, as real as you and I are sitting here right now, that everything around you is sending you messages. So just by the way you're sitting right now and the way you just nodded your head sent me a secret message that there's a conspiracy against me. Or the fact that you're looking at me the way you're looking at me, I know you're controlling my thoughts. So imagine living that. You can't, it's next to impossible to lead a normal life.
And would it be like if the director told me right now, Kyle, who are you talking to? There's nobody in that chair. And I go, what do you mean? It's Dr. Dom, he's right here. They go, Kyle, no one's there.
Right.
But I'm seeing you.
It's real.
Wow.
It's real. Your brain is processing information and presenting to itself a reality that is not the objective reality that we all share.
What's the average age of onset?
Okay, so schizophrenia, what we see is males and females are a little bit different. So males tend to have we call it first break psychosis, which is that first real presentation of schizophrenia. And we usually see first break in males, late teens, 17, 18, 19, early 20s. But in females, we see it early 20s, even into the 30s. So females are a little bit further down the line as far as age and onset. However, what I will say is this, the way that schizophrenia presents and progresses, we usually see something called a prodromal phase. And it's usually retrospective. You kind of look back and you go, oh wow, yeah, we did see these signs. When I speak to family members, they did see these signs. And the prodromal phase is very similar to the negative symptoms that I was talking about, meaning they're not having hallucinations, delusions, or anything like that yet, but they seemed as though everything was going fine. They were going to school, they had friends, they were getting along well, they were in the family, everything seemed great. And then at like 17, 18, 19, just spending more time in their room, isolating, maybe acting a little bizarre, maybe feeling a little bit paranoid, not really spending time with their friends. Their dress becomes a little bit different. They stop grooming, daily activities of living, showering, grooming. Like things just start to fall off. And that's where people start to see the change. It's not this sudden presentation of those positive symptoms. It's more the negative stuff, the more withdrawn affect, right? And that's usually what you see. And sometimes that can be years. Sometimes it could be months. But then they experience what we call the first break, and that usually happens again in males around the early 20s and females a little bit later.
I talked to Kevin Hines, who jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge, survived, 0.002% chance of surviving. He survived.
Just incredible.
He has a bipolar diagnosis with, and I believe I'm getting this correct, I may not, but I think I am, with schizophrenic features. So we're talking about schizophrenia. Is having schizophrenia different than having schizophrenic features?
Yep. Part of the confusion, and an important discussion to have, is that psychosis is a symptom. Now, we're going to talk about psychosis, but psychosis is that breach in reality where you experience hallucinations, delusions, fixed false beliefs. That's psychosis, but that's a symptom, okay? If you have bipolar disorder and you become manic, you could become psychotic. You could start seeing things and hearing things and acting delusional and paranoid. If you become severely depressed, you can have a psychotic component to that depression. That is very different. It's starkly different than schizophrenia, which is that prodromal phase, the first break, a very consistent psychosis that is very fixed and chronic. You see, when you're comparing this to bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, that tends to be episodic. And the features of the psychosis are a little bit different, right? So although someone can experience psychosis in other mental illness, it's not necessarily schizophrenia. Was that clear?
But all people who are living with schizophrenia have to have an episode of psychosis.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Now, I also interviewed a woman, Sami Grimm. She was diagnosed correctly, finally, with borderline personality disorder, but she explained that some days she has voices talking to her.
Yeah.
She'll be at work and they'll be narrating her life, saying, here comes that woman, she's about to pay for her purchase, and now you're putting it in a bag now. That's not schizophrenia.
No.
Okay.
Psychotic features. Potentially psychotic features, but now we're really getting into some nuances of psychiatry. And sometimes people with mood disorders or even personality disorders can have overvalued ideas, obsessions, ruminating thoughts, right? But that's not necessarily a hallucination. Are they truly hearing, as if I'm speaking to you right now, a voice, right? So that's where the nuance of psychiatry comes in to really sort of tease some of these things out. But again, people can experience psychosis in a lot of different mental illness and other things, medical illness.
Yeah.
But schizophrenia, once it sets in, it's a chronic illness. It's a lifelong illness. There is no cure for schizophrenia. It's not episodic. People do have exacerbations of psychosis, right? Where it gets worse. And we know that stressors, life stressors, things like that can make it worse. But it does stay relatively chronic. Medication helps. And treatment helps, and statistics show that some people can go on to lead very normal lives if they're treated appropriately, and that's going to be part of our discussion too.
Wonderful.
But it's an important topic, Kyle.
Yeah.
It's a very important topic because I think it's incredibly misunderstood.
Well, we've had a lot of requests from our MedCircle members to do this series, so I'm excited to dive in. We're going to break it down part by part, and in our next session, we'll talk about the causes of schizophrenia.